had always dreamed of owning my own bakery, a small but cozy place where people could taste happiness in every bite. When I finally found the perfect spot, a little shop near the city square, my heart soared. But the excitement was short-lived. My sister's husband, Greg, a man whose charm masked a cruel streak, appeared one afternoon with a fake smile that never reached his eyes. He claimed to help me get started, but I already sensed something off. The first week went smoothly. Customers trickled in, and I felt the joy of creation. Then, strange things began happening. Ingredients went missing, deliveries were delayed, and my best recipes were mysteriously ruined. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I was too naive, too inexperienced, but deep down I knew someone was deliberately sabotaging me. One evening I caught Greg offering advice to one of my suppliers, whispering something while smiling sweetly. His presence made me uneasy, and I realized this wasn't simple jealousy. He was trying to destroy my dream. That's when I decided I wouldn't let him win. I would fight him not with anger but with intelligence. The game had begun. I started keeping meticulous records of everything in the bakery. Suppliers, deliveries, even who touched what and when. I began observing Greg closely whenever he came by, noting the slight smirk when a new problem arose. He was good at hiding his tracks, too good, and I realized I couldn't confront him directly yet. I needed proof. One evening as I locked up, I noticed the back door slightly ajar. Panic surged, but I stayed calm, reminding myself that fear was my enemy. I slipped inside quietly and found flour spilled across the floor. The mess wasn't random, it was staged, meant to make me look incompetent. I snapped a photo with my phone and tucked it into my folder of evidence. Greg had underestimated me. I wasn't just some helpless dreamer. I had brains, and I knew exactly how to turn his games against him. I started planting small traps, fake orders, messages, and altered recipes, to watch who would mess with them. And then it happened. Greg fell for one of my little setups, revealing his involvement without even realizing it. I felt a rush of power, but I didn't celebrate. Not yet. The real challenge was ahead. I had to take him down completely, and in a way that would shock everyone, including my sister. I invited Greg over under the pretense of showing him the bakery's new menu. He strutted in, confident, exuding that fake charm, expecting to see me floundering. But I had laid out my cards carefully. On the table, I displayed receipts, supplier messages, and photos of sabotaged batches. His eyes flickered, a shadow of panic creeping over his usually smug face. "You've been trying to ruin me," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Do you know what that makes you?" I let the words hang. He tried to laugh it off, but I could see the tension. I had anticipated every excuse, every lie he might throw. I had even documented his earlier whispering with a supplier, solid proof that he was meddling with my business. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. But the real twist was yet to come. I couldn't just expose him publicly. That would satisfy the moment, but it wouldn't guarantee my victory. I needed him to overplay, to step into the trap fully. So I smiled sweetly and told him I was considering expanding, mentioning a potential investor who loved sabotage stories. Greg leaned in, eyes gleaming with greed. I knew he couldn't resist. And when he did, everything would fall into place exactly as I had planned. The stage was set for the grand revelation. Over the next few days, I played my role perfectly. Friendly, naive, even grateful for Greg's advice. Behind the scenes, I was analyzing every move he made. I noticed patterns. He visited at predictable times, tried to charm suppliers, and subtly pressured my staff. But he had one weakness, his ego. It was massive, and I intended to use it. I sent a fake message to a supplier, hinting that I had a major investor ready to fund a new branch, but only if everything ran smoothly. Within hours, Greg started micromanaging, offering to fix things for me, thinking I was still clueless. He bragged openly to my sister about how he was helping me succeed, while secretly, he was setting himself up to fall. One evening I stayed late, reviewing the security footage. My stomach twisted when I saw Greg sneaking around the back storage, rifling through orders and scribbling notes. I captured everything on my phone. I realized that the moment I had been waiting for was approaching. I had to push him to take the final bait. I smiled to myself, a little wicked thrill running through me. Greg thought he was playing a game, but I was the one writing the rules now. And soon, everyone would see exactly who the mastermind was. I decided it was time to escalate. I created a fake plan for a secret expansion, sending Greg an email outlining a supposedly lucrative deal with a high-profile client. I deliberately left hints that this deal was worth millions, enough to tempt his greed. Within hours, he was in my bakery, eyes gleaming, ready to manipulate me into giving him access. But I had anticipated every move. I recorded the conversation secretly, knowing that any slip he made would become undeniable proof of sabotage. He suggested cutting corners, manipulating suppliers, even lying about expenses. His arrogance blinded him to the trap I had laid. Meanwhile, my staff began noticing how I was handling the sabotage with calm intelligence rather than panic. They admired my composure, and I realized this was transforming me, not just as a business owner but as someone who could outsmart anyone. That night I stayed late again, reviewing the recordings. My pulse raced. Greg had revealed more than I imagined. I could see the moment he truly believed he had outsmarted me. And that illusion, I thought, was about to shatter spectacularly. The next day, I invited Greg for a strategy meeting, a term I knew would make him feel powerful. He arrived, confident, carrying a notebook full of his schemes. I smiled warmly, pretending to be impressed. "Greg, you've been such a huge help. I couldn't have managed this without your guidance," I said. He puffed up with pride. But I noticed a slight twitch in his eye, the moment of vulnerability. That was my signal. I began casually mentioning my investors' conditions, emphasizing that someone was watching every detail, every move. Greg leaned in, eager to prove his usefulness, suggesting illegal shortcuts to maximize profit. I recorded every word. My heart raced, but I stayed calm. I wanted him to keep digging the hole himself. By the end of the meeting, I had everything I needed. The recordings, the written notes, and the photographic evidence of his sabotage were sufficient to ensure he couldn't wriggle out. I realized then how powerful I had become. I wasn't just protecting my dream anymore. I was rewriting the rules, showing that intelligence and patience could defeat cruelty and arrogance. Greg grew bolder after the meeting, oblivious that I had turned the entire plan against him. He started spreading rumors to suppliers, trying to destabilize my relationships. But I had anticipated this. I subtly tipped off the suppliers with evidence of his schemes, making him appear desperate and untrustworthy. The thrill of watching him unravel was intoxicating. Each failed attempt he made only strengthened my position. I began documenting everything meticulously, preparing for the ultimate reveal. I imagined the moment my sister would see the truth. How Greg, her husband, had tried to destroy me for selfish reasons. Late one night, I discovered another attempt at sabotage. The main oven had been tampered with. But I was ready. I caught Greg red-handed through the security cameras, smiling inwardly at how predictable he was. He had underestimated me at every turn, believing his charm and cunning were enough. I realized revenge wasn't just about proving a point. It was about reclaiming my power. And the more I watched him stumble, the more confident I became. Soon, everyone would witness his downfall, and no one would doubt that I had been the mastermind all along. I invited my sister over, casually mentioning a business showcase for potential investors. Greg insisted on coming, his arrogance shining. I knew this would be the stage for the climax. I had set everything perfectly. The recordings playing subtly in the background, supplier confirmations ready, and evidence of his sabotage organized in a neat file. During the meeting, Greg tried to interject, claiming he had been helping. I smiled sweetly and let him speak. Every lie, every boast, only dug him deeper. My sister raised an eyebrow, sensing something was off. The tension in the room was thick, and I could see Greg's confidence beginning to crack. Then I handed my sister the file. Her eyes widened as she read the evidence. I watched Greg's face pale, the realization hitting him that his games had been exposed. He tried to defend himself, but every excuse crumbled against the documentation I had gathered. The moment was electric. Silence filled the room, punctuated only by my sister's sharp gasp. Greg's arrogance had turned into panic, and I had stayed calm, intelligent, and patient, waiting for the exact moment to reveal the truth. Greg's panic was almost cinematic. He stammered, trying to explain, trying to charm his way out, but my sister wasn't fooled. I had anticipated this reaction, and it was glorious to see him unravel. Every smirk, every sneer he had worn was gone, replaced by fear and desperation. I felt a surge of vindication but remained composed. I didn't want this to feel like a petty victory. It was justice. I explained calmly how I had documented his sabotage, showing receipts, photographs, and recordings. Each piece of evidence reinforced the truth, leaving no room for denial. My sister's expression shifted from shock to anger. She realized how blindly she had trusted him. Greg tried one last plea, but it sounded hollow, pathetic. The very people he thought he could manipulate now saw him for what he truly was. I felt a strange mix of relief and triumph. The months of sabotage, fear, and planning had led to this exact moment. The smartest move wasn't confrontation. It was patience, observation, and strategy. And Greg had walked straight into the trap I had set for him. The aftermath was surreal. Greg was forced to step back from my life, my sister struggling with disbelief and betrayal. My bakery flourished in the weeks that followed, the drama drawing attention from loyal customers and even local media intrigued by the story of cunning versus cruelty. I realized that the experience had changed me. I wasn't just a baker anymore. I was a strategist, a woman who could protect her dreams against manipulation and deceit. My sister eventually forgave me, but the lesson was clear. No one should underestimate intelligence, patience, or the power of documented truth. Even Greg's attempts to sway others backfired. His reputation was tarnished, while my name became synonymous with clever resilience. I had taken what could have been a disaster and turned it into a narrative of empowerment and justice. And yet, I knew this wasn't just the end. It was a transformation. I had learned to anticipate, to observe, and to outsmart those who underestimated me. The thrill of victory wasn't just in seeing him fail. It was in realizing I could rise above cruelty and emerge stronger, smarter, and unstoppable. I started noticing subtle changes in how suppliers and customers treated me. Whispers of Greg's sabotage had spread, and everyone now saw me as the clever, resilient one. But I knew I couldn't let my guard down. Greg was cunning and even exposed. He might try something desperate. One night I stayed late in the bakery, reviewing security footage. There he was again, lurking outside, eyes darting as if he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My heart raced, but I didn't panic. I had already anticipated desperate moves. I called a trusted supplier to double-check deliveries and set up a small trap outside the shop, just to see what he would do. Sure enough, Greg tried to tamper with the storage lock. I captured it all on camera, smiling to myself. Each failed attempt reinforced the lesson. Patience, observation, and planning always win. The trap wasn't just about catching him. It was about demonstrating that I had full control. I realized that every step of this journey had transformed me. Fear no longer dictated my actions. Strategy did. I was no longer just the baker with a dream. I was the architect of a plan that would ensure Greg's downfall, and I was finally ready to deliver the final, unforgettable blow. I decided to go public, but subtly. I reached out to a journalist, framing the story around a young entrepreneur overcoming mysterious sabotage. I didn't mention Greg directly, only hinting at an insider trying to ruin me. The journalist was intrigued, promising to cover the story in a feature that would go viral locally. Meanwhile, Greg grew more reckless. He sent anonymous threats, tried manipulating my sister again, and even hinted at legal action. But every move he made played right into my hands. I had already prepared for this. Emails, recordings, and photographic evidence were organized in a foolproof dossier. One evening, I invited my sister for dinner at the bakery, under the guise of celebrating a new milestone. Greg arrived, insisting on joining. I could see the tension in his eyes as I casually mentioned the journalist's upcoming feature. He tried to intervene, but I calmly handed him a copy of his own sabotaging emails, proof of his every malicious act. The room fell silent. My sister's eyes widened, her anger mixing with shock. Greg's confidence crumbled visibly. I knew then that the final act had begun. Everyone was about to see the real story unfold, and he had no escape. The journalist visited the bakery the next morning, recording interviews with me, staff, and even some suppliers. I kept my composure, sharing my journey of dedication, resilience, and careful observation. I hinted at sabotage but left out Greg's identity entirely, letting the evidence speak for itself. By afternoon, the feature went live online. The story quickly gained traction. Comments flooded in, praising my intelligence, patience, and ability to overcome adversity. And then, subtly, the evidence of sabotage started surfacing alongside public speculation. Greg's name began appearing, though not yet linked directly to him by the media. I watched his panic grow. He called my sister multiple times, begging her to believe him, claiming innocence. But she had already seen the emails and recordings I had sent earlier. Her trust in him faltered with every lie he spoke. It was the perfect storm: public curiosity, undeniable evidence, and a desperate manipulator in over his head. I realized then that revenge didn't have to be violent or vengeful. It could be intelligent, public, and humiliating. And watching him slowly unravel while I remained calm, composed, and victorious was more satisfying than I had ever imagined. I sensed Greg's desperation intensifying. He tried bribing a supplier to claim I was incompetent, but I had anticipated this. I had pre-recorded calls, capturing every detail. When the supplier reported the attempt, Greg's credibility fell even further. I began subtly coaching my staff to maintain confidence and professionalism, reinforcing my control. Every time Greg attempted something underhanded, I countered effortlessly. It became almost theatrical, like a chess game where every move had been predicted. One night, my sister confronted Greg privately. She demanded the truth. He tried to manipulate, to charm, but his usual tactics failed miserably. She called me afterward, tears in her eyes but admiration on her face. She finally understood how much I had endured and how carefully I had orchestrated every step. I realized then that my transformation was complete. I was no longer just a victim of sabotage. I was the mastermind, the one who had outsmarted a cruel, addictive villain while keeping my integrity intact. And the final act, the public reveal that would shock everyone, was about to begin. I planned a grand reopening for the bakery, framing it as a celebration of growth and resilience. Invitations went out to media, suppliers, and loyal customers. The setup was perfect. Subtle displays of the evidence, recordings cued for private viewing, and Greg himself unknowingly being lured into the trap. On the day of the event, Greg arrived, expecting to show off his supposed help. I greeted him warmly, masking every ounce of contempt. Guests arrived, and I kept the atmosphere lively and celebratory, all while positioning the evidence strategically. Then I cued the video recordings. The sabotage, the tampering, and his own words played quietly on a screen behind the counter. Greg's face turned pale as he realized he was exposed. The room fell silent, guests staring in shock at the man who had tried to ruin me. I felt a thrill of satisfaction, but I remained calm. This was the culmination of months of patience, planning, and intelligence. I had transformed betrayal into triumph, proving that cleverness and composure could outmatch arrogance and cruelty. And in that moment everyone, including my sister, saw the true mastermind behind the story. The fallout was immediate. Greg tried to speak, But every attempt to justify himself only confirmed his guilt. Media coverage spread rapidly, praising my cleverness, patience, and resilience. Even local business networks began referencing the story as an example of strategic brilliance in overcoming sabotage. My sister was finally able to see the full picture. Tears and apologies flowed, both for trusting Greg blindly and for doubting my abilities. I forgave her, understanding that manipulation can blind even the closest relationships. The important thing was that truth and intelligence had prevailed. Greg, humiliated and cornered, had no choice but to withdraw entirely. His reputation was ruined, leaving him exposed to anyone he might try to manipulate in the future. I felt a sense of justice that was deeper than simple revenge. It was about demonstrating that cruelty and greed cannot triumph over patience, intelligence, and resilience. The bakery thrived. Customers came in not only for the food but for the story, eager to support the woman who had turned sabotage into triumph. And I realized something profound. My dream had survived, stronger than ever, and so had I. With Greg out of the picture, I focused on growth. I expanded the bakery, adding new products, hosting workshops, and creating a community hub for aspiring bakers. Every new step was infused with the lessons I had learned: vigilance, preparation, and patience. I also began mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing my story carefully, emphasizing strategy over emotion. My sister joined me in this endeavor, both humbled and inspired. Together, we rebuilt trust and strengthened our bond, turning a painful betrayal into a story of empowerment. Occasionally, I would glance at the footage I had collected over the months, a reminder of how far I had come. Fear had once gripped me, but intelligence, observation, and strategy had transformed that fear into power. And though Greg occasionally lurked in my thoughts as a reminder of cruelty and arrogance, I no longer feared him. I had outsmarted him at every turn, orchestrating a downfall so complete that it shocked everyone, including him. I had become a master of my fate, a woman who could turn adversity into triumph, and a living example that brains always win over brutality. Perfect. Let's continue with chapters 18 to 25, completing the story with a suspenseful, cinematic, and satisfying ending. Each chapter will remain 210-220 words, first-person narration, and full of suspense, transformation, and payoff. Even after Greg was publicly exposed, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might try a final desperate move. I began double-checking every supplier, every shipment, and even my staff's routines. Trust was now earned, not assumed. Every late-night noise outside or unexpected visitor made me cautious, but it was a healthy caution, born from experience. Meanwhile, the bakery's reputation soared. Local media featured my story as a lesson in patience, intelligence, and resilience. Customers came not just for pastries but for a taste of the triumph they could see in every corner of the bakery. My sister helped manage the growing attention, ensuring that our family name, and my brand, remained untarnished. One evening as I closed up, I saw Greg standing across the street, watching silently. My pulse quickened, but I didn't panic. I had anticipated every move, even this silent intimidation. I smiled slightly, knowing he could never touch my dream again. Months of sabotage, fear, and planning had led to this point. I realized the power I now held wasn't just in defeating him, but in knowing that intelligence, patience, and strategic thinking could outlast cruelty and arrogance. Greg had underestimated me at every turn, and now he would pay the price for a lifetime. Business was booming, but I didn't let the growth distract me. I continued refining operations, training staff, and expanding our menu. Every decision I made was strategic, built on lessons from Greg's sabotage. I realized that this experience had sharpened me, turning me from a dreamer into a master strategist. I began receiving invitations to speak at local business events. People wanted to hear the story of the young woman who had outsmarted a manipulative insider. I told my story carefully, focusing on intelligence, patience, and observation. I emphasized that revenge wasn't about anger, it was about strategy and foresight. Greg tried contacting my sister again, but she ignored him completely. His reputation had been irreversibly damaged. Suppliers refused to work with him, and his social connections evaporated quickly. I realized that justice wasn't about punishment alone. It was about letting truth and integrity prevail. One quiet night, I walked through the bakery, reflecting on everything that had happened. Every photo, every recording, every carefully plotted step had led to this moment. I smiled to myself, knowing that my dream had survived, and I had transformed into someone far stronger than I had ever imagined. The bakery expansion became a turning point. I opened a second branch, strategically located near a busy business district. The grand opening was flawless. Loyal customers, media coverage, and an unmistakable sense of triumph filled the air. I had meticulously planned every detail, ensuring no mistakes could happen. Suppliers were amazed at my organizational skills and strategic planning. Staff members, inspired by my leadership, went above and beyond. The sabotage that once threatened to destroy me had now transformed into lessons of resilience, patience, and foresight. I was no longer just a baker, I was a leader. Greg, isolated and desperate, tried one last attempt at damage, spreading rumors, but I had anticipated it. My network of suppliers and friends ensured the rumors were crushed before they could spread. He had lost every advantage, every ally. I realized then that the true power of revenge lay not in malice but in intelligence, preparation, and timing. Watching Greg's plans fail again and again had been deeply satisfying, but the true reward was knowing I could rise above cruelty and manipulation and achieve my dreams with integrity and tact. One afternoon, a major investor visited, interested in funding further expansion. They had heard about my story and wanted someone with resilience and intelligence at the helm. I shared my journey honestly, showing the evidence of sabotage and explaining how I had outsmarted it all. The investor was impressed. "You didn't just save your business," they said. "You transformed it, and yourself, in the process." I realized then how far I had come. Fear had once held me back, but intelligence, patience, and strategy had pushed me forward. Greg's shadow lingered faintly, but he no longer had any power over me. I had dismantled his influence completely, proving that cunning could be outsmarted, cruelty could be overcome, and dreams could survive sabotage. I smiled, reflecting on my journey, from naive dreamer to strategic mastermind. My bakery wasn't just thriving, it was a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and the satisfaction of turning betrayal into triumph. Months later, my story went viral on social media. People admired not just my bakery but the strategy, patience, and intelligence I had demonstrated. I began mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them how to anticipate sabotage, manage crises, and turn adversity into advantage. Greg had disappeared from our lives entirely. Any attempts to contact my sister or me were blocked and ignored. The humiliation had been complete, and the lesson unforgettable. I realized that true victory wasn't in revenge alone. It was in transformation. I had emerged smarter, stronger, and more strategic than ever. Even in quiet moments, I reflected on the journey. Every mistake I had avoided, every careful observation, and every strategic counter had shaped me. Fear and anger had been powerful motivators, but intelligence, patience, and foresight had been my weapons. The bakery continued to flourish, a symbol of triumph over cruelty, and a reminder that clever planning could turn the darkest challenges into the brightest victories. I decided to host a community event, celebrating not just the bakery but resilience, empowerment, and strategic thinking. Local entrepreneurs and young dreamers attended, inspired by my journey. I shared the lessons I had learned. Always observe, anticipate, and never let arrogance blind you. My sister attended too, supportive and proud. Our relationship had transformed. The betrayal had tested us, but patience, intelligence, and truth had healed the rift. Together we showed that resilience could triumph over cruelty. Greg's name came up only once, whispered among attendees who had heard rumors. Smiled. He no longer had power over me. His downfall had been complete, public, and irreversible. And that was a victory sweeter than any cake or pastry I had ever created. I realized that the greatest revenge isn't anger. It's transformation. It's turning betrayal into strategy, sabotage into lessons, and cruelty into triumph. That was the story I wanted the world to know. I reflected on my journey quietly one night, alone in the bakery. From naive dreamer to strategic mastermind, every challenge had shaped me. Greg's attempts to destroy me had failed spectacularly because I had combined intelligence with patience, observation, and careful planning. The bakery had grown beyond my wildest dreams, but more importantly, I had grown. Fear and anger no longer dictated my actions. Strategy, foresight, and calm intelligence did. The thrill of triumph was not in seeing him fail. It was in knowing I could rise above cruelty, protect my dreams, and emerge stronger than ever. I knew one thing with certainty. My life had transformed forever. Every betrayal, every sabotage, and every moment of doubt had led me to this point. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, unstoppable and proud. The world now saw Mary, the baker who outsmarted cruelty, preserved integrity, and turned a nightmare into triumph. And that, I realized, was worth more than anything Greg could ever have taken from me. The final twist came unexpectedly. A prominent entrepreneur reached out, inspired by my story and impressed by my resilience. They offered a partnership to expand my bakery nationally. I accepted, knowing that intelligence, patience, and strategy had finally unlocked doors that talent alone never could. Greg's shadow was completely gone. His reputation ruined, his schemes exposed. He no longer posed a threat. My sister and I celebrated, not just for the bakery, but for surviving betrayal and emerging victorious. Looking back, I realized the journey had been more than revenge. It had been transformation. I had learned that intelligence and patience could dismantle cruelty, that strategic thinking could protect dreams, and that integrity could shine even in the darkest moments. As I locked the bakery that night, I smiled. I had turned sabotage into strategy, betrayal into triumph, and a nightmare into a story that would inspire countless others. And that was the ultimate victory. A life rebuilt, a dream preserved, and a legacy of clever resilience that would never be forgotten. The end.